Welcome to the Sustainability Business Podcast, a show bringing conversations to the community shaping the future of energy and sustainability. Be sure to join us on LinkedIn and learn about the innovative solutions that are turning the tide towards a more sustainable future for all. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sustainability Business Podcast. I am Emily Austin, the host of this episode, as part of our series, The Other Scopes. This is a series in which we look at sustainability from an everyday life angle. In this episode, we'll dive into the world of mental health and work-life balance in a global organisation. We're exploring strategies for maintaining well-being whilst excelling in the professional world. I'm joined today by Donna Green, the Wellbeing Lead at Schneider Electric in the UK and Ireland, and also Sheppard, a mental health first aider trainer at Mindful Butterfly. We're going to dive into what mental health can look like at work, what leadership, managers and employees can do to foster good mental health in the workplace. Ladies, will you please introduce yourselves? And can you tell me in a couple of sentences how you work with mental health and resources and why you got into it? Let's start with Donna.
Hi, so I'm Donna Green. I'm the UK and Ireland's own Wellbeing Lead for Schneider Electric. This is a volunteer role for me, and I trained as a mental health first aider in February 2023. And I was so passionate about taking part in that training because I've myself suffered with ill mental health at times, and I've carried the stigma for a long, long time, and had that embarrassment of not wanting to share. So the possibility of being able to lose the stigma from businesses and have people stand up and own their mental health and appreciate that we all suffer from time to time with poor mental health was just wonderful to be able to be part of that. And then my role as the UK and Ireland Wellbeing Lead means that I can try to put some preventative measures in and try to encourage people to take the steps on their overall wellbeing to safeguard their mental health. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily, for inviting me on today. And Donna, nice to catch up with you again. Sheppard, company is Mindful Butterfly. I do a lot of work with EIC and have worked more recently with Schneider Electrics, which has been fabulous. My background is a trainer, educator, communicator in public-private sectors and worked in many different sectors of industry throughout my life, including FE with youngsters, and seen a lot of mental ill health on my journey. And alongside all my different jobs, I've also been a farmer for 35 years and I had 1,000 sheep and sheep get depressed too. If they lost a lamb, they wouldn't eat, they wouldn't sleep, and it was quite hard going to get an animal going. But anyway, we unfortunately lose one farmer a week to suicide in this country. And so when the farm was sold a while ago, my journey took off to actually help people become educated and informed about mental ill health. We have in our family some lived addictions, and also with alcohol and drugs, and also with mental ill health. As Donna, this is an equal opportunities thing. It doesn't matter who you are, where you live, it can impact on anyone. So when we sold the farm, I became full-time trainer in delivering mental health awareness and first aid, also suicide information and awareness and first aid. And I've enjoyed my journey to help people get the tools in their box to recognise when someone's not very well and to apply it to myself as well, because as I said, equal opportunities. We've all got to be vigilant around this stuff. So thanks for inviting me today.
Well, thank you, both of you. You sound like you have a lot of experience to pull on, and will be able to give hopefully some advice to the people that are listening. You both have very real and relevant experiences with mental health, and I really appreciate that you're here today to discuss that with us. As a quick intro to the topic, and obviously today we're going to be talking around mental health in the workplace. Can both of you give me a short summary of what mental health in the workplace means to you? And we'll start again with Donna, if that's all right.
So mental health in the workplace is, we spend much of our waking hours at work. We're there more often than not, and at times that's where our behaviour would be most obvious, because we may be taking on additional stresses for our work, but that's our colleagues are the people we should be in a position to rely on to watch out for those signs for us. And I think the more awareness we can offer to people and the more tools and training we can give to people to look out for that, the better. And the way I look at it is the HSE have in place all of these criteria to make sure that workplaces are safe and healthy and, we don't have lots of accidents. But there is no such criteria for mental health. And I would say probably we're more likely to demonstrate an ill mental health at some point in work than we are maybe to cut or injure ourselves, because there's so many safeguards in place for that. So for mental health in the workplace, for me, means that we all should be looking out for each other.
Totally agree. I just want to jump in there and ask you to define HSE for those that wouldn't know.
Oh yeah, sorry. So there's a health and safety executive. So in the UK, the health and safety executive is the one that oversees all of the health and safety at work policies.
It is very interesting, actually, that mental health is not covered in there. Do you know of any work ongoing that's pushing to bring mental health into that policy?
I don't know of it, perhaps Steph's would, but what I would say is I think it's also very difficult to define as well, isn't it? You can say you need to wear gloves to avoid cutting fingers. You can say you need to tie your hair back to stop hair going in food. And, there's lots of preventative measures you can put in place for physical injuries, but those injuries that you might feel to your mental state, the people don't know that that's happening, and it's not obvious always. And so by training everybody to be proactive and looking for these signs and what Debs does is just wonderful, because that teaches you to look out and just to keep your colleagues in mind and, recognise when their behaviour changes or, and it's not to say that they'll always look more depressed or more subdued. It may be that they're the other way around. And suddenly they're behaving a bit more erratic, but know that that's not normal for them, and then to approach them.
Debs, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
What it looks like in the workplace. It's interesting, isn't it? And as Donna said, you go back a while and it was all about the dodgy back, the bad back syndrome, and the Health and Safety at Work Act, the Horser Act in 1974 came in to protect people's physical health. But actually there is a duty of care hidden in there really to protect people's mental health, because your health is your health, whether it's physical or mental. It's so intertwined, as Donna said, it is intertwined between the two. One doesn't exist without the other. So I think companies now, are really taking on board the fact that we must look after people's mental health, because we do have not only a moral obligation as decent human beings, but potentially a legal obligation. And that will be coming in, I'm sure, in more force. And what does mental health look like in the workplace? Well, to me, mental health, and Donna will remember this, it's how you feel, how you think, how you behave. And for me, when I'm feeling positive, when I'm behaving the 10 out of 10 Debs I can be, not an arse to everyone, that's when I'm at my best. That's when I'm happy. Can I be that in the workplace? It depends very much on your workplace, doesn't it, Emily?
Absolutely.
Are you a square peg in a round hole? Are you trying to be someone that you're not? So, psychological safety in the workplace, that's a new buzzword. There was Project Aristotle did a research study recently, key factors to identify a successful team. And those that were most successful felt most psychologically safe in themselves, to feel what they needed to feel, to behave how they felt they needed to behave. And actually, targets were exceeded by 17% for productivity when people felt psychologically safe. So I think the accountants out there are going to be saying, yep, whoopee, let's get on this mental health stuff and make people feel mentally welcome in the workplace, that they can have mental fitness there, not just be physically protected, but mentally protected. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that statistic just goes to show how much better we perform, if we're happier, comfortable, feeling safe. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, regarding to today's kind of fast-paced, global, large organizations, what are some common challenges that you see employees facing when it comes to maintaining a healthy work-life balance?
Yeah, global organizations, time zone differences, that can create difficulties. If you have someone in America wants to access training in the UK, what time do they have to get up in the morning? So can your organization switch it around so you have afternoon training in the UK, which means it's morning in the US? So yeah, it is difficult when you're trying to maintain that work-life balance if you have time zone differences. Another one is public holidays. What might be holiday here is not in a different time zone. And that, I think that gives difficulties for people and challenges and expectations culturally. Some cultures take far less holidays than we do in the UK. So yeah. I don't think we have enough here, but some cultures don't expect you to take time off. And paternity leave, maternity leave, there are differences throughout the world of expectations on people. So if you are a global company, how does that pan out? That people don't feel that they've been hard done by if they are different on a different footing to colleagues in a different country. Yeah, I don't know if Donna has some input onto that. Yeah.
I have a team in America and in Australia, actually. I have a very global team that I work directly with, and we do have to think about these things daily when we're coordinating meetings and trainings. So that's a really interesting one that I hadn't thought about in terms of mental health. But of course, if you weren't able to join meetings and trainings, you would feel left out. Absolutely. Donna, sorry, I cut in. What are some common challenges that you see employees face?
Yeah, I mean, it's really to mirror what Deb said, really. I mean, we are a global organisation at Schneider Electric, but, in some of the Middle Eastern countries, they work on a Saturday, but they don't work on a Friday. So, and I think that our boundaries are so blurred because we have this need to respond to every ping and every notification with an immediate effect. And you can see if somebody has their phone with them at the weekend and something comes in, and I see this with my husband quite a lot, really, is that he's itching to get to his phone and deal with it because he doesn't want that notification there. And I think because we've got so much access now to technology, that it's so difficult to switch off. I have noticed that there's a number of people now around our organisation that do put that our working hours may differ to yours, and you're not expected to respond outside of your normal working hours, which is great. But once that email's there and it's in the back of your mind to move away from that and forget about it until your next working day, that's quite difficult. And I think that's something that, and it's something that we've inherited, really. And since the pandemic, a lot of people that were working on desktop computers in the office have now got laptops. And, do we take the time out when we've got free time? Do we sit back and relax, or do we catch up with work? Because that's another element. It's kind of, I've got a spare hour here. I'll just switch on my laptop and do something else. Just finish off that quote, just do this, just do that, just respond to that email instead of going, actually, this is my downtime now. And there's not enough downtime because we've got so much access to technology.
I think you're really bang on there that people feel responsible, that they need to answer it immediately, which is a culture that's very unhealthy. And I know Schneider don't do it, but it kind of creeps in because we have that ease of access to technology, and then you don't give yourself permission to switch off. You have to give yourself permission to say, actually, I'm going to disconnect now. I'm not going to look at my phone. I will not have my work emails on my personal phone, because that will just lead you down that rabbit hole of saying, I've got to do it because of fear, expectations. If I miss out on something, then maybe I'll be judged. So it comes back to just your own boundaries, which are hard to put in place. No one teaches us, do they?
No, and we consider it to be selfish, you see, because we consider doing anything for ourselves as selfish. But actually, if you and I were talking now, and I said to you, just take an hour out. It's like you've had permission based to do that because somebody said take an hour out. But for you to make that decision yourself and just go, right, I've got a spare hour. Shall I just lie on the sofa and just chill for a bit, or read a book for an hour? Or I could just get on and do that. I could just, that quote could be done in an hour, and I could get that back to the customer. Or I could respond to that email that came in on Friday night. No, nobody's seen. We just have got too much, like you say, too much guilt on ourselves, and feel that we're being selfish if we take that time for us.
Yeah.
Boundaries is a really interesting point that you bring up, Donna. And we're talking about, I wonder if you two have seen, or if either of you have seen any differences between boundaries set between different generations, or is it more person type? Because I know younger generations are probably, okay, maybe this is a generalizing statement on my side, but younger generations are more connected all the time, and have technology, at their fingertips 24/7. It feels like. Is there any difference between the boundaries set by younger people and older people around work-life balance boundaries? So how often they would be connected to work? Do you see any differences in that?
If I can come in on that one, I have seen a change because I deliver youth mental health first aid as well. And, 75% of all mental ill health starts before the age of 18. It's quite shocking. I have seen youngsters coming into the workplace saying, I will switch off now because I'm not working for free. You're not paying me to work outside my work hours, which is a different culture to when I was brought up. You did everything possible to make sure the job was done. And they're saying, actually, no, I need some self-care around this. So I have seen a change, Emily. I don't know if that's universal, but in my experience, youngsters are now looking at their mental health with a different way that I used to when we were growing up. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I wonder if it's because they need to more, as you say, the more mental health issues in young people. Maybe they do need to have that self-care and good boundaries in place.
Yeah. Donna, I don't know if you noticed in Schneider with you got an apprenticeship schemes, don't you? You do take young people
we do,
through.
Yeah. And I think you're right to some extent. I mean, I've seen it probably more with my daughter. My daughter also works in an office, but she works, office environment, but from home. And, because it's quite a small business that she works for, she feels that there's a requirement for her to work longer hours than what she's paid for. And I think going back to when I first started work, it was quite expected of you to stay. If you finish at 5, you weren't considered being a good employee if you left on the dot at 5 o'clock. Everybody tried to always push it out to, at least, fashionably leave around 5:30, 5:45, because it looked like you were dedicated. And nowadays, I don't think there is that same level, because they're going, but I finish at 5. They've kind of got these rules. This is the time that I finish work. But then I think to some extent, they may also then still get some of those bad practices from the older generation, because they see everybody else staying later and doing things later, that they feel the pressure to do that. And then, like you say, they are probably on social media too in the evenings, and it's all that technology and bombarding them. And then it's so easy to flip between one program and another. So you could be on social media 1 minute and straight over and see work emails the next without even thinking. And the other thing is, how many of us use our work laptop to set our alarm clock for the morning? So it's the last thing we look at when we go to sleep. And I can bet you bottom dollar, if it wakes you up in the morning, the first thing you do is look at your emails.
Yeah, those are not very good boundaries. I have a couple of things that I wanted to kind of zone in on from what you've just said. Donna, do you think the size of the company matters? So you said that your daughter works for a smaller company and there is a higher expectation to stay longer. Do you think the size of the company makes a difference in that?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is a lessons learned element to this as well. Businesses have learned that people's ill mental health is something they need to take on board. And some businesses, I'm sure, do a tick box exercise, but I think the global larger companies like Schneider, they take it very seriously. And one of the things that we're trying to do now is to promote for people to take their lunch breaks, because people will often just carry on checking emails whilst they're, eating a sandwich or something like that. And I've just done a training session this morning where I've said, that's 30 minutes in your day that you're not affording yourself, and you're not paid to do those 30 minutes of work. So take that 30 minutes and get a breath of fresh air, take time away, close your laptop, turn your phone over, just, it's 30 minutes. What huge difference is it going to make? It's there for a reason. It's in your contract for a reason. It's for you to take. So, but I do think the smaller companies, because I worked for a smaller company before Schneider, and that's where I saw this this mindset that it was important to stay later than your finish time. And I think that is still there. I think there is still an element of that in smaller workplaces.
I can understand that. I think larger global organizations might have more privilege, like more opportunity, and have more resources, so they don't need that to happen. They don't need people to stay longer than their allotted hours to get the work done, because they have more resources generally in the company. Having said that, I have had managers in my time that value longer working hours and have said that to the team. If someone was there early in the morning, they've made that very clear that is what they think makes a good employee, which can not foster the best environment at work, I don't think.
I think culturally as well, we've had people come from different countries and they fully expect you to stay later, or they'll book a meeting for 5 o'clock or something and expect you just to change your plans and stay, because that's what happens in the country that they've come from and their culture. But then, perhaps they get that time back in lieu, which we're not always so great in doing. So even if we do work over, we don't necessarily say, well, I worked 3 hours over last week, so I'm going to take 3 hours. We just take it on the chin and that's it. So I think culturally, I would say.
I think, Donna, up in your Leeds site, you have 50 different nationalities, 50 different nationalities in Leeds site. And that was amazing to me. And I was talking to people there about setting and sharing the expectations around, because people will thrive if there's clarity around expectations and boundaries. And we can embrace different working patterns and still be clear about what an organisation needs to meet its operational needs, if you have good communication. But I think it's to do with informing people, educating people, particularly managers. They say your line manager has more impact on your decision making than your partner, which is quite scary, really. But you can only do that with that open communication, with, honest, open discussion about different working styles, different preferences. Some people, for, presenteeism, that's been talked a lot at the minute. And at some level of light mental illness, it's quite good to be in work, because work gives us lots of good stuff, doesn't it? It gives you routine, it gives you connectivity, it's your tribe, it gives you a sense of purpose, all those things that are so important to keep us mentally fit. And if suddenly you're like, no, you can't come in because maybe you've got depression, well, you might say, actually, guys, I can't work in the morning because my med's kicking, but I could work in the afternoon. Would that be acceptable? So it's that open, honest discussion around that stuff, isn't it, which will lead us to a place of embracing different styles of working, as long as the main needs of the organisation are met, because obviously there's a profit motive as well. There's 4 pillars of well-being that will kick in. Yeah. Sorry, I jumped in there.
No, excellent. That's what we like. Thanks for thanks for bringing up those topics. I kind of want to jump on from there. You mentioned work patterns and flexibility for individuals. So my question, I'm going to ask you, Debs, again, and then Donna can weigh in after. How can organizations foster this culture that prioritizes mental health?
Well, it starts with leadership, top down, but also bottom up. And I've seen phenomenal, miraculous changes within an organization where the leaders have said, we need to know about this stuff. We need to know about mental health awareness. We need to spot the signs and symptoms, as Donna said. But then also the team members who are maybe on the shop floor, maybe in the factory, maybe on the manufacturing, they need to be aware of things such as language. Words have power, Emily, that, fabulous power, and you can use them in a positive way or a negative. And if your team members aren't well informed, you can create an atmosphere of discrimination really quickly. So organizations, to foster that culture, has to start with education, in my view, and a willingness by the leaders, top down, but also bottom up through an awareness on that floor as well. And I think Schneider have done a fab job of that, both ways. 1 in 10, if you get 1 in 10 people in the workplace trained in either a mental health awareness or a first aider or a champion, then you start to get a sea change in how people see mental health, how they talk about it, how it's viewed, that it's not viewed that you're useless and all the rest of the things that we have, all the bad words around mental ill health. I'm not going to say them out loud here on a podcast, but we have masses and we have very few positive words around when someone's mentally unwell. So yeah, top down, bottom up, it's fostering those 5 ways to well-being within your workplace, of connectivity, of taking notice of what's going on around you, giving back. It's another way that people are creating that environment in the workplace. They're doing half a day of volunteering a month with a team. I don't know what Schneider did, probably Donna you do, but nationwide they go in and do half a day in the homeless people shelter in Swindon. They sweep up, they make breakfast, they make beds. What does that give us? It gives us connectivity to the community and it makes us feel good. If we give back, we feel good. And being active, yeah. So, and keeping learning. We've got to keep people learning. Our minds are muscles and they need to be active. So there's many ways, the 5 ways to wellbeing, that an organisation can implement and foster that culture within its workplace. Yeah, that inclusivity is important, isn't it? Take your whole self to work. The best Debs I can be.
Totally. Donna, do you want to come in on there with what Schneider does do around kind of training, volunteering, the kind of things that we have in place to culture this mental well-being work environment?
Sure. Yeah, so absolutely. 12th of July is Schneider's volunteering day. So we've got volunteering happening all across the country in UK and Ireland. So we promote it around the 12th, but of course we've got some elements of flexibility around, business need and things like that. So it's around about the 12th of July, but the 12th of July is our official day. And generally, last year we did, from the Flint site where I work, we went and we did some litter picking along the industrial estate where we are. I know there was people that went to nurseries and painted fences and playgrounds and tidied up and that kind of thing. And, it was a great success. And this is our second year going. Doing the volunteering. And then the year before that, we actually just had a recharge day. And it was the year after the pandemic. And it was kind of like, it's a COVID-19 recharge day. It's like, just take the day to spend with your family. And the only proviso was that we shared what we did. So, we had the day, but we didn't, if we took our family anywhere or we did anything, because, it was that we shared it and told everybody what we did with it. I think we found that the volunteering is actually, it gives a little bit more back, like Debs was saying, it gives something back to the community. It makes you feel good because you've done something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. I mean, just going back to what Debs had said about mental health first aid, is Schneider's focus is to get 1 in 10. And at the moment, we've got about 4% of our employees are mental health first aider trained. So, and that's growing. I mean, I don't know how many cohorts we're doing, but we're constantly recruiting for more cohorts for mental health first aiders. So we've got people across the business that can support. And what we say is that if you don't have to talk to somebody that's on your site or within your team, you can contact anybody from that list, because some people don't want to tell somebody that they're going to be seeing on a day-by-day basis about their personal business. So it's and I've helped people that I've never met. They've reached out to me just because I'm a mental health first aider, and because they tended to be their field sales, and they we met via Teams and had a conversation, and I was able to signpost them that way, rather than them feeling like they needed to share their personal information with colleagues, even though they did have them within their team. Yeah, I just think it is opening up, let people know that it's okay. It's okay to feel like that. Validate their feelings, validate everybody's feelings, whatever that is, that feeling is valid. If they're feeling it, that's okay. But let's work with it. Let's, open the doors and let people come and talk to us.
Absolutely. It's really amazing to hear that Schneider's goal is 1 in 10 mental health first aiders. And as you say, having those people, absolutely, having those people available to talk to, whether you know them or not. And as you say, it might actually be more useful not to know them, not to be involved in them on a day-to-day basis, to give you that kind of freedom to really speak about how you are feeling. On that, Donna, I know you mentioned earlier on around the stigma that you've dealt with yourself. I'd like to touch on the stigma that does surround mental health in the workplace, what that is and what that has been and how it's changed over time. Do you want to start on that, Donna?
Again, it's a generational thing, probably, going back in the day. It's not something you talked about. You were a bit ashamed if you'd had any sort of bouts of depression, had suicidal thoughts. If it was considered a weakness. It was considered to be weak if you suffered with panic attacks or stress or anything like that. And I think I've suffered with bouts of depression, and I did have postnatal depression, but I didn't tell people at work. I think when I had my postnatal depression, I was signed off work with that. And obviously I was very lucky that my sick note only went to my manager and it wasn't kind of general knowledge, but I never shared that. It was as though I was ashamed of it. And I was ashamed of it, I suppose, and now I think, what are you ashamed of? It's not, you wouldn't be ashamed to tell somebody you've broken your leg, or even if you fall over, and that can be quite embarrassing, can't it? If you've fallen over somewhere and twisted your ankle, you wouldn't be ashamed to tell somebody that, because that's seen as being more acceptable. But something has happened, a major life event has happened to me, and I had my daughter, and I'd had her in a quite traumatic situation and was left with postnatal depression, but I was ashamed. And I was ashamed because that wasn't what I thought was normal. And so for me, it's about that stigma is only there because people hide it, because you hide how you're feeling. If people aren't hiding, then that stigma can't exist. If people are okay and they own their own experiences, there is no stigma. But we've got this fear of judgment, and that's heavier on us than anything else, because we worry what other people might think of us.
Yeah. Stigma is a massive thing, isn't it? Stigma is how we think about things, which can lead to actions around that thing, which can be discriminatory. And as you said, Donna, a lot of it, and I'm sorry for your experience, but a lot of it goes back to our frame of reference, our unique view of the world because of our background and how we judge ourselves, things that we carry with us because they were given to us as we were growing up. And what we need to do is step outside of that subconscious bias that we all have to give ourselves permission to be the whole us and to have your own views. But in the workplace, I have noticed that there is becoming less stigma, but a lot of it can exist because of people being ill-informed and fearful of not wanting to upset someone. Silence can be discriminatory, and we don't know if someone comes back, say, from leave because they've had depression. It's different to coming back after a broken leg. If someone's had a broken leg, it's like, oh, how's your leg? Are you all mended now? You off running again? If it's depression, no one knows quite what to say. Well, how's your head now? It's like, and that silence is deafening for somebody who has come back into the workplace maybe, and that will stop other people from reaching out. So a lot of it is based around lack of information, lack of knowledge of how to talk about mental health and what to say if someone is struggling and unable to reach out. Yeah.
And I just touching on that as well, Deb. So, we talk about men's mental health. I mean, men are more susceptible to suicide than women. And this is due to the fact that they probably bottle things up more than women do. Women are more likely to talk about it. to talk about it to a friend, not that even if it's not a work colleague, but men close up more. And I think that comes back again, exactly what you said, to your frame of reference.
Yeah.
I remember my brother wasn't allowed to cry, and it's kind of like it wasn't acceptable back in the day, and it's kind of like, but it's good. And I say to my son now, crying's a good thing, and you should cry if you feel you need to, because that's what it's there for. It releases all that pressure that you've got carrying in your body. You cry and you're flushing that out. So and I wonder how many of those men then go on to give the same message to their own sons. So it's really, definitely.
Yeah. But hopefully these kind of discussions and this information that you two are passing on through the world and through the workplace and through your families kind of can break that stigma and kind of bring awareness and give people the space to talk about it. I just wanted to ask if you've seen the stigma decrease, change over time, as we have. I think we have got more willing to talk about mental health in the last few years. So I wanted to see what you've experienced on that.
From my point of view, I work across many different industries with small, large companies, and I have seen a fabulous decrease in stigma within the workplace, that it's okay to not be okay. You look at some of the big fours like PwC, and they are modelling vulnerability. And once they start to do that, then it opens the door, Emily, for others to walk through and say, yeah, I'm not okay at the moment and I would like to be well. So how can we make that happen? And that's what companies are putting in. And I know Schneider support the EIC, the Electricals Industries charity, really strongly. So if someone is fearful within their workplace, they might be able to look laterally at a charity within that industry, like the EIC, who do fabulous work with people who are finding times difficult, and can reach out that way to avoid any potential thoughts of being discriminated against in the workplace. Yeah,
same for us, really. I mean, last year, Schneider in the UK and Ireland, we did a mental health awareness, and we sent all of the offices all had green ribbons, and we weren't asking people to buy them. We were giving them to people. People could donate if they wanted to, and we gave that money to the EIC, but we weren't asking people to buy them because some people might not want to spend their money on that, but we wanted everybody to have give the same message to everyone else that we supported it. And we had Wear It Green days, and we did do a panel discussion about vulnerability and mental health, and it's that definitely opens up the doors to more people opening up about their mental health.
Absolutely. Awareness is key.
Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about kind of what organizations are doing, what managers can do around training side. I wanted to ask you, what kind of things can individuals do? What kind of things can people put into their own self-care routine? What are there some strategies that people can take that they can do on a daily basis to support, protect, improve their own mental well-being?
Yeah, absolutely there are, Emily. And Donna knows my favourite phrase, do your check-up from the neck up every morning.
Yeah.
I love that.
Check in with yourself. How am I feeling, thinking, behaving? And I know myself when I'm well. I'll bounce out of bed before the alarm goes off. I might go swimming before work. I get to work early with a smile on my face. This is me on a good day. So I'm checking in regularly with my mental health. Am I thriving, or am I just hanging on and surviving? If I'm just hanging on, I will have to wait until the alarm goes off, and I'll probably chuck it across the room and because I'm not feeling great and I don't do my exercise. I don't have my breakfast. I'll grouch and growl at people. We need to know ourselves, Emily. We need to know when we're well and when we're not so well. And if I'm not so well, what has put me in that position? Can I avoid it? Can I put some protection around myself? And if I can't, what can I change within my internal circle? Stephen Covey does some fabulous stuff around that to make sure that I do get back on track, and if I can't get back on track, What is my wellness recovery action plan? What do I need to do? Who do I need to reach out to make sure that I can be the best me I can be? And we don't teach this stuff in school, but we need it. We need to know how to do that on a daily basis. It's like my whole self MOT. MHFA England have a fab little GIF about that and a graphic. My whole self MOT most days, and my stress container. Donna knows that one too. Check in with my stress container. What's in there that is above my pay grade that I'm worrying about? Get rid of it, because stress is not good for us. Stress will take us under, and it will create mental ill health. Absolutely, it will. So I'll empty my stress container most days. Yeah. Donna, what do you do now on a daily basis?
Yeah, so the self-care is paramount, really. I mean, it's that recognizing, it's taking that time out, it's going and having a cuppa with your friend and just chilling out and not thinking about things. Going and walking. I walk my dogs every evening up the mountain, and I like to go on my own, and that's not because I'm being unsociable, but it helps me to file away my day. Because what I found was, if I hadn't done that, I'd get into bed in the evening. That's the first time that I've been alone with my thoughts. And that's when they all start coming out and stops me from sleeping and interferes with my resting time. So by walking or taking some time to do something alone means that I can file away all those thoughts, and then I've got a clear mind when I go to bed. And yeah, like Deb said, it's doing that, your own MOT. Making sure, actually, I'm not feeling too great today. What's happening with me? Why is that the case? And just consider, think about, one thing is like with meditation, people can poo-poo meditation, and I'm not great at it, but I'm starting to learn. And one of the things is, to start to relax the muscles in your face. And I thought, my muscles aren't tense, but actually when you tell yourself to relax the muscles or move your tongue, be aware that your tongue is touching the roof of your mouth. And I was like, oh my gosh, it actually is, and actually release the muscles in your forehead. And my muscles are tense, but I don't know that until somebody tells me to relax them. So, by having these little tips in the back of your mind, those are all the things that help you to relieve those stresses as well. And also to understand what is your problem or somebody else's problem. Don't take on everybody's issues. As a mum and a wife and all of those things, it's so easy that somebody's going through a tough time that you're worried for them. You're worried for what you're doing. You're worried for your children. You're worried for not everything is for you to sort out. And you have got the stress container, and when it's full, and you don't need to keep pouring into it. So there is an element of selfishness, but that's because that's what's going to keep you there, your longevity of your mental health, to be able to support those people with their problems in the end.
Definitely. I think I've heard this phrase or saying, if your own cup is not full, you cannot share with anyone else. You have to be a little selfish to ensure that you're in your best form, or at least trying to get there, to then be able to help others around you and to give your best self.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So we mentioned it earlier, and I wanted to ask you, what are the things to look for in yourself and in your colleagues to notice people when they're struggling with their mental health?
I think Donna touched on it. Sometimes you see nothing, Emily, so be wary around that one. Don't presume you will always see stuff, because we don't. But for the majority of people, we're looking for changed behaviours out of character activities, either rocking up early at work, leaving late, productivity going up rapidly or going down, maybe safety practices being compromised. What else? Disconnecting when they would normally sit with everyone at lunchtime and have a chat, but they're not, they're isolating. And then the physical things, like Donna said, you might see someone gaining weight, losing weight. Don't presume. It's don't presume. It might just be they're on a diet, or they're just like the Mackie D's at the minute. So changes in behaviour, changes in physical appearance, changes in emotions. If someone's becoming more emotional than they would normally be, somebody and the kind of language they're using. Watch out for the words. Are they, because we did touch on suicide. If someone isn't feeling great, they might say something like, well, don't give that to me. I'm useless. I'm always hopeless at doing stuff like that. Everyone would be better off without me. Just listen, listen out, be observant. Yeah, you got to get your detective hat on in the workplace. You've got to be vigilant around this stuff and watch for those signs and symptoms. Yeah, Donna, you were saying earlier about some stuff, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, there are the signs, as you just said, but the other thing that we've just done a training session actually this morning with some emerging leaders at Schneider, and one of the things that we did in our training session was active listening and empathy. And it's don't ask the question if you're not going to listen to the answer. Is the message that I gave. How many times a day do we say, hi, you okay? And then we don't even hear the answer. They could say no, they could say, generally they will say, I'm fine, because everybody will. But are they fine? So you need to use your active listening and actually ask the question and listen to the answer, and probe if need to be. If you're still got this instinct that something's not quite right, then it's okay to ask a bit more. It's okay to say, how much have you got on your plate at the moment? Do you need any help with anything? Or can I help with anything? Or, ask all those questions. Make sure that they know that they can turn to you if things aren't so great. I think from a colleague's perspective, we're a little bit worried about taking on too much ourselves, aren't we? And ending up with other people's work. But generally, people don't do that. Generally, people will only ask for help if they need it. And I think it is very, very important to reframe how you ask your questions. We're too flippant, I think, with our questions.
And also, Donna, we don't have to fix anybody. That's a fear, isn't it? If I ask them and they tell me something bad, I've got to make it all right. No, we don't. We don't. Like you say, active listening, signposting. And I know you've got your employee assistance program with Schneider, which is fabulous. We signpost, don't we? And sometimes it is just a download that person needs, and then they'll feel better. But like you said, if you ask someone, what do you need? I've often found that's opened the floodgates, because no one's ever asked them what they needed. They've told them what they think they should do or what they think they should have, but they've never said, what do you need? Yeah, that's a fab question. Well done.
That is a really good one.
If somebody comes in talking to you, and you've kind of got a bit of an inkling that this might be a serious conversation, it's close your laptop, turn your phone over, don't be beholden to technology. Give them that time. Because that might be the only time they come in and they've actually managed to get the courage or the conviction to actually walk through the door and say there's something's not right for them. And if you're too busy with your emails and you're not really listening, or you're distracted by a text message, then that you might miss that critical point. And unfortunately, there are people that get so low, and they can become really quite low before they ask for any help and approach people. And that's a point where we could miss them, and they could become suicidal.
Yeah. I think the other thing, Donna, is in your workplace, you have so many different cultures, touching back to that. And culturally, some people will not talk about mental health because the words for it don't exist. The vocabulary isn't there, or they're shamed around it. There's also the generational differences. Emily, you touched on that. It can be an age thing as well, can't it? And a gender thing as well. Men don't talk. So there are so many different barriers to communication and for people to talk about their difficulties with their mental health. But I think what Schneider are doing is breaking down those barriers and letting people know that it's okay, and there is a safe space in which you can talk about that stuff. Silence as well, in some cultures that's seen as rude. And it's like, oh, okay, fill that silence. But normally you would sit with silence, because that's a very powerful tool to sit with someone in silence until they're ready and feel connected enough to you and trust you enough to talk to you. Yeah,
absolutely. I think this active listening, giving people space, is a really good way to start, and to give people that opportunity to discuss their mental health if they want to, if they're ready to. Ladies, thank you so much for your time today. I think we're going to stop there. Thank you for sharing your insights, your experience, and your advice on this huge topic. I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Yep. Let's do another one.
I love it. Let's do it. Thank you for listening to the Sustainability Business Podcast. We hope you've been inspired by the Trailblazers and their innovative solutions for a more sustainable future. Be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn to stay engaged and informed. Together, we can be the change makers our planet needs.